The Chicago White Sox finished off the season in the most fitting way possible, losing big to the Minnesota Twins and ending the year with an 81-81 record. Wednesday's game was basically over after the first inning. The roller coaster ride of 2022 is finally over, and now the offseason has begun. Hopefully, serious changes happen, and they happen soon as the White Sox look to get back on top of the AL Central in 2023.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Sox fans, welcome to Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen each and every day. We're free and available on all platforms. Follow us on Twitter at Locked On Sox. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just search Locked On White Sox. Hey, I'm your host, Nick Morawski, a lifelong diehard Chicago White Sox fan, recording this podcast just blocks from the ballpark in beautiful Bridgeport. You can find me on Twitter at Nick_GGTB. Really appreciate you letting me steal some of your time once again to talk White Sox. Locked On White Sox is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So many questions that need to be answered this offseason. Jose Abreu's final act was as silent as the offense on Wednesday. The way the Sox lost their final game was very similar to their 2021 ending, and more of my managerial thoughts. State of the White Sox, they finished the season 81-81, second place in the AL Central, finished 11 games back of the Cleveland Guardians. White Sox lost, and they lost big to the Minnesota Twins Wednesday afternoon, 10-1. A very fitting end to one of the most disappointing seasons of my lifetime. And I know I'm not the only one that will say that. I think about 1993, such an exciting team for me. Really, it was that good guys wear black. You had Frank Thomas, of course, Robin Ventura, and Ozzie Guillen, and on and Blackjack McDowell and the pitching staff, and how exciting that team was, and to get bounced by the Toronto Blue Jays, who had an outstanding team. That was disappointing. But then 1994, so crushing for so many different reasons. Of course, the Sox had an amazing team once again, as we all kind of figured they would, and the strike happened. 2006, expectations so high after the World Series. Sox were predicted by a lot of folks in the know, of course, to go right back to the World Series. And hey, they had a successful year. They won 90 games, but to not only miss the division, but also miss the postseason, that was tough. 2000 was a difficult year. Of course, these years where they made the playoffs and they just didn't make it to the World Series, crushing. 2000, such a fun year. Frank Thomas had, in my mind, should have been the MVP that season. Lost to the Mariners. 2008. Of course, we were just celebrating the anniversary a few days ago, that game 163, the blackout game, and then what happened to them against Tampa. I was there in the stands when they were bounced out of that playoff series. Didn't want to leave the stadium because that was such an exciting, fun, scrappy team, and the way they got into the postseason, so exciting. And of course, you got to think about last year. That was a team that you felt maybe they were destined. Everything they overcame, and they were exposed in so many ways in the ALDS, and to know that we're not even going to win a postseason series, leaving the ballpark dejecting. So expectations, of course, were there in '94. They were there in 2006, just like they were this season, up and down all year long, waiting for the Sox to get on a run. We had it there shortly when Miguel Cairo took over as acting manager, but Cleveland came into town, and that was that. I was at the game on Wednesday with my wife and my son, and my wife asked me, is it going to be difficult to say goodbye to everything, to the ballpark, to the games, to the whole, everything that goes along with White Sox baseball. You get into a routine, your evenings are set up and consuming White Sox content and just meeting up with friends, the tailgating, everything, talking to buddies, family, coworkers about the Sox. It's a 6 to 7 month journey. And usually it is very difficult to say goodbye. And I got to be honest with you, it's kind of easy to say goodbye this season. And I think it's because of how bad and how disappointing this team was. And there's a part of me that knows this needs to end so some change can occur. I went to the game, as a lot of people, I think, went, hoping to see Abreu one final time. Jose Abreu requested a day off to watch the game alongside Miguel Cairo and taking the game from the manager's point of view. In the post game, Miguel Cairo did talk about how they tried to maybe get Jose Abreu out there some way to be honored by the fans, but I think it's just Jose Abreu's way, didn't want the attention, and that did not happen. It was odd walking around the ballpark on Wednesday. It was an afternoon game and not a horrible crowd for the last game of the year. Had myself one of those Cuban Comet sandwiches, one of my favorites in the ballpark. Definitely going to miss the food, that's for sure. So normally, I am disappointed for White Sox baseball to be gone. However, it's just a little easier for some reason this year. Because I want change to happen. It feels like 2017, 2018. Enjoyed the Sox. That is, I don't have an off-season sport. The White Sox are my off-season team. Eat, sleep, drink White Sox. So of course it's difficult, but I was kind of excited to get the off-season going. What kind of moves are going to be made? How are we going to get this team better? What prospects will we see? The developments. And I guess that's where I'm coming from with 2022. I want to see the change. There needs to be change. It has to happen. Front office, possibly coaching, staff, managers, players. You're going to see some new faces. So as soon as we can get that going, and it has felt like this season's been over for a while, as soon as we can get that going, the better. Is kind of comparing Wednesday to Game 4 of the ALDS. Perhaps you were at that game as well. It was very difficult leaving the ballpark last year. That was a sad day, especially after Game 3, kind of blackout game 2.0. The highs of that game, the excitement, and then of course the weather came in, and there was a rain postponement that moved things a day off, and that was a tough game to sit through. Just kind of processing most of the game, having to say goodbye to that season, which was such a fun season. 2021, I was crushed because that team was exciting, and to be bounced out of the postseason so quickly, it was dejecting. Leaving the ballpark this year, I got to say, confusing. Not sure where this team is headed, but hopefully brighter days, will be with us in late March, April. You even think in mid-February, when pitchers and catchers start reporting, you just hope there's a different vibe, a better vibe for this team to get back on top of the AL Central. Wednesday's season finale was a very sad goodbye to a season no one expected. However, it was on brand for the White Sox. More on that in a moment. BetOnline.net is your number one source for football betting info this season. Find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth articles and analysis on every game you can find. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sport wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores of every sport out there. The fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to betonline.net or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. So, like I had mentioned, I was there for this. On Wednesday, the season wrapped up with the Sox losing to the Minnesota Twins 10-1. That 10-1 final, just like in 2021, Game 4 of the ALDS, you were walking out of the stadium trying to wrap your brain around a 10-1 defeat, and that's exactly the feeling on Wednesday. Kind of eerie, kind of bizarre. Game on Wednesday was basically over in the first inning. Davis Martin was on the hill. He went an inning and 2/3, gave up 7 hits, 9 earned runs, had a strikeout, and he gave up 2 home runs. He left the game with a bicep injury. Hopefully it's nothing too serious. Davis Martin had a really good season with the White Sox. It is not easy to bounce back and forth from Charlotte back to Chicago and all points in between. And he put up some really nice numbers, I thought, for having, not a ton of experience and being asked to do what he needed to do in some tough games. So, we'll break down Davis Martin in these off-season episodes, but not a good showing though on Wednesday. The bullpen, they did a really nice job. They had to cover 7 1/3 innings. You had Velasquez, Bummer, Diekman, Ruiz, Lambert. They only gave up 1 run, which was nice. But again, things were pretty much over, especially with the way the offense handled things. A little bit of a bizarre lineup from Miguel Cairo, Elvis Andrews, Yohan Moncada, Vaughn, Sheets, Harrison, Peyton, Gonzalez, and Engel and Perez were your lineup for Wednesday. No Jimenez and no Abreu. Sox offense, just 1 run, 8 hits, 2 extra base hits. Carlos Perez with the lone RBI. Sox were 1 for 8 with runners in scoring position. So it is the end of the roller coaster. Lots to process. It's going to take a while to really kind of sit with how things went sideways. And they kind of had been going sideways for a while. There was always that hope that they'll figure it out, right? They've got the talent. This team is going to start performing to the back of their baseball card, as a lot of folks would say. It just didn't happen. Hopefully, though, the front office gets back to work as soon as possible. 2011, you got to go back to that season 11 years ago. That was the last time there was a season where we knew there was going to be a managerial change while games were still going on. Of course, Ozzie Guillen left 2 games with 2 games remaining. Don Cooper was the manager for the last 2 games of the season. I still haven't gotten a straight answer of what happened to Ozzie Guillen. I have heard he was traded to the Marlins, that he quit, that he resigned, that, a lot of different happenings. But anyway, he left with some games remaining. Don Cooper handled those. So we knew there was going to be a change before the season was over. In this year, we, of course, have known there's going to be a change for a while, it seems. It's kind of felt like, we've been thinking about 2023 for quite some time. Maybe even before the Guardians series. We were holding on hope. Like, they sweep the Guardians. they're right back in this division. Anything can happen. They hold the tiebreaker, and we still have some baseball to play here. But after that game one, and then the way they played, of course, we've been thinking about this offseason and next year for a long time. The telecast has featured it, the radio broadcast, a lot of questions. The NBC Sports Chicago pre and post, Chuck and Ozzy. Hypotheticals of what will this team look like? How did things go so wrong? Players, coaching staff, front office, manager. A lot of names are going to be different. In terms of managers, I'm still thinking about this every day. I think about, are there any new names that, I can be kind of high on? And I'm not really driven by names right now. I know there's a lot of folks in a lather with Espada and Lombard, and that's in the top of their lists. Hey, I get that. Maybe they interview well, and they are a perfect fit for what Rick Hahn and company are looking for, and they are given permission to, bring in their staff and really do it right. Of course, Bruce Bochy and Willie Harris keep popping up. Joe Madden was on in the Chicago Sun-Times front page, the sports section, how Joe Madden should be the next manager. And, as the NBC Sports Chicago post game wrapped up on Wednesday, Ozzie Guillen spoke a lot about what it would feel like to maybe come back to manage, maybe if it's the right fit, talks to family, it gets an interview, all that kind of stuff. So Guillen's name is still there until, of course, it's not. Rick Hahn said a bunch of stuff on Monday. Who knows what is really true? Will they really go outside the organization and find a fresh perspective? So no, I don't have right now, a lot of guys. I've liked Sandy Alomar Jr. for a while. I'm kind of confused why he's never been a big league manager. There's something to that. Maybe he's comfortable in his role with Cleveland's organization. Maybe he just hasn't been a good fit, but I just feel like he's been around winning baseball. He has gotten to see firsthand from one of the better managers of my generation, Francona. Boy, he has been so successful. And Sandy Alomar Jr. has watched that and has been involved in that process. I think he'd make a good manager. I don't know if he's going to be a good fit for the White Sox, but what I really want is a thorough managerial search. I mean, find the right fit, really do a search. And I'm sure they've got their guys right now, but I hope they bring in a bunch of different candidates with different types of perspective and experience. And, every day there's going to be, I think, a new twist to this. But, this is the time to do it. It is the off season, but Locked On White Sox has you covered. More on that in a moment. So it really has felt like we've been talking about the off season for a while, but here it is. I just want to say thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Thank you for passing this podcast along to so many other Sox fans. I've appreciate, bringing my passion and perspective and love for the White Sox to you on a daily basis. This is episode 133 of In Season. Actual game content episodes. It has been a wild ride, and again, I don't take it lightly. And I've met some great folks, whether it's just through social media or in person, and the kind words, and to know that I can maybe bring. I could maybe make this experience a little bit brighter. It's been a tough season, and but I'm a lifelong diehard fan. I just don't say it. This is me through and through. So I'm bummed that the season's over, but I do appreciate this opportunity to be with you. And I thank you so very, very much for just the continued support, the listens, and for passing this podcast around. The off season for Locked On White Sox will look a little different. When big news breaks, Locked On Sox will be there. It should be an eventful off season. Maybe not a lot of money is going to be thrown around, but new faces, I hope. Um, I plan on taking a little bit of time off next week, Monday through Friday, just to kind of decompress, process everything. But the goal is for Locked On Sox to be pretty much a daily podcast through the off season. So continue to pass this podcast along to other Sox fans in your life. I really do appreciate it. Thank you so much for making this podcast part of your daily routine. You can find the Locked On White Sox podcast absolutely everywhere you find your podcasts. We are on Twitter at Locked On Sox. You can find me on Twitter at Nick_GGTB. Thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen. Now make your second listen the Locked On MLB podcast. MLB expert Paul Francis Sullivan brings humor, passion, and unique perspective on every team and the biggest stories around the league. Follow the #1 daily league-wide podcast, Locked On MLB, on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Coming up on the next episode, I will try to make some sense of what happened this year. I'll go through the numbers and explore what went right and what went wrong. Really appreciate you making time once again for the Locked On White Sox podcast. I'm Nick Morawski, and until next time, go Sox.